Why did the deputy director use Sae Ha? When they were doing tests on Sae Ha, they measured how much electromagnetic radiation he emits. It turns out to be over 100, which is impossible for a human under normal conditions to emit. Thus, she decides to let go of both the culprit and use Sae Ha as a bait to lure the ghost in. She theorizes if she's not done with Sae Ha, the ghost will need to see him again. Did Sae Ha die? And did Ma Nok die? Yes, Ma Nok dies in both different timelines, and Sae Ha dies in both different timelines. But there's a catch. Timeline 1, the team chases after him, and after anyone who emits more than 100 on this scale. Ma Nok manages to throw away the GPS tracker and escapes. Sae Ha happens to be in the same area where he's hiding as he is looking for him. Ma Nok recalls Sae Ha as the person who killed the janitor, and he's angry. He hides from him until something drops. Sae Ha sees the object, and as he's about to retrieve it, Ma Nok appears and stabs him to death. Officials arrive and they shoot him, but it's too late. Sae Ha dies. As he's dying in the first timeline, Sae Ha recalls his conversation with the ghost in 1997. She tells him as long as the sun is there is no safety without the grid. She tells him more people need to be sacrificed for this to happen and points at him. Sae Ha calls her shameless, but she says it's in order for her and her mother to be alive. Timeline 2, after that flashback, the ghost basically goes back in time and tries to stop Sae Ha's death. She changes the situation so that when Ma Nok escapes, Byeok spots him and chases after him. The same thing happens again. Ma Nok disappears, and this time, Sae Ha is with Byeok, and they discuss him not knowing he's here. She's about to tell him how she's connected to him when suddenly he comes out swinging at her with a sharp tool. The ghost interferes again, but this time there is another man who is from the future. He stops her hands as she's trying to divert it from Byeok's face. This causes a bit of delay, and Sae Ha ends up getting hit in the head, and Byeok shoots Ma Nok. Sae Ha dies in Byeok's arms. The ghost looks up, and it appears that the grid is altered and void. The two ghosts now work together in order to do something about the death of Sae Ha. They combine the power of their device to do something about the blood that's coming out of his head, but it appears to not have worked. Did Jin and Byeok get back together? No, but they had sex which led to a child. After Sae Ha's funeral, she drives with him to her place. He asks if she wants drinks and she refuses. He calls her later, and she finds out he's been drinking. They chat about Sae Ha and his death, spelling out more exposition for the NT each time. It turns out that Sae Ha helped the ghost kill that janitor because, without it, the grid wouldn't have been made, and Jin wouldn't have survived too, because he got hurt when he captured her. She ends up telling him she'll drive him home, but they kiss on their way to the basement. It's implied they had sex. A year later, Byeok has been living in the countryside looking after her child whose name is Byeok. Jin shows up rushing her to get out of here before they come. She seems stunned to see him, because she's living in the countryside and it's hinted that she had the child without his knowledge. He tells her she and Byeok won't be okay, unless they leave now. When she asks him who told him the child's name, he says, "You did." How does Grid ends? Grid ends with Byeok, the child and Jin driving away in a car. Meanwhile, the grid disappears, and beams from the skies start to hit everything, killing people instantly. The same man who fought the ghost when she tried to save Sae Ha from death takes off his mask. The character is played by Kai Hong Lee. He says the grid is gone from all times and layers. Jae-myung then appears and tells him, "You never know." The ghost is also laying there on a bed while they have this conversation. Meanwhile, Byeok, the child and Jin rush to the countryside in what seems to be an entry to an underground facility. There, they're greeted by Sae Ha and the ghost who take the baby, and the four of them go inside that facility avoiding getting killed. Why did Sae Ha have to die? He had to die, because otherwise the ghost wouldn't have been born. It seemed that without his death, he would have gotten romantically involved with Byeok, and if that happened, she and Jin wouldn't gotten together after his funeral and had sex. Thus, Byeok was born. My theory is, Byeok is the ghost's mother, as the ghost had previously implied to Sae Ha in the beginning of the episode, that without his sacrifice she wouldn't be born, neither her mother. How did Sae Ha manage to show up, and end up not eventually dead? I don't honestly have a concrete answer, but as he was dying after being struck by Ma Nok's tool on the back of his head, the two ghosts got together, and began doing something to him. The blood gushing out of his head appears to have been reduced, so this means they could have done something to make it look like Sae Ha died, but he hadn't actually died. Or they just replaced his body with someone else's during that thing they did. Either way, it's implied he's still alive, and his death was merely a setup. What does Ma Nok have to do with anything? I have been trying to wrap my brain around that, and I think I found it. I think he was basically a tool. Let me explain. The screenwriter doesn't make an effort to explain how he's related to them, and as Byeok was about to say she has a connection to him, she decided not to. She tells Sae Ha she'll nip it in the bud if what she suspects turns out to be true. Ma Nok could have been somewhat related to her, as in her brother, but that's not the main point. My theory is the fact that he was saved, so Byeok and Sae Ha can meet and become connected, and it would ultimately lead to the sacrifice of Sae Ha. If Ma Nok died, those characters would have not met, so these are my thoughts on the grid and its confusing ending. What did you guys think of it?